Need custom beer labels fast? At InTouch Labels and Packaging, we deliver industry-leading 3-day turnaround on every order, regardless of quantity. We carry a wide assortment of die-cut templates in standard and custom shapes and sizes. With a combination of top-of-the-line machines and experienced operators, InTouch can pump out an astonishing quantity of custom labels quickly. Our competitive pricing means you get top-quality labels without breaking the bank. Need help? Our top-tier customer service is here to assist you every step of the way. So why wait? Get your custom labels with lightning-fast 3-day turnaround and unbeatable service at InTouch Labels and Packaging, where your brand gets the attention it deserves.
Oh, okay, there I am. Hello, everybody. My name is Brian Goodman. I am one of the owners and managing partners of Rushford Sons Brewhouse in beautiful, safe Upton, Massachusetts. And today I'm here to talk about how we're growing our business in a shrinking market with scotch tape and bubblegum. I don't know if the scotch tape and bubblegum got put in the description, but it is my euphemism for with very limited resources. So Rushford and Sons was founded by me and my partner, Mike Rushford, who's our brewer. I always joke that if it was up to me to make the beer, we may as well lock the doors now. If I was prepared with a slideshow, I'd have the meme of I'm somewhat of a brewer myself, but I'm not. I'm just here for not even really passionate about beer. I'm a fermentation enthusiast myself, but I'm passionate about what beer represents. And believe me, I will talk about that going forward until either my time's over and you click off, or whichever one comes first. So Rushford and Sons, we opened in December 2020. And you can imagine opening during peak COVID was a little bit of a challenge. We had to pivot our timeline. We only ended up with a fraction of the investment money that we were looking for because of COVID uncertainty. And so we've always been overworked and undercapitalized since we started the business, but we're still growing despite the craft beer market shrinking. And I kind of want to talk about mostly for my benefit, not necessarily for your benefit, but if you get some benefit here, I really hope you do, because realistically, this talk is for me from 4.5 years ago when this place was still just kind of a glimmer in my eye, and how our philosophy's changed a little bit and kind of been laser focused to grow in an industry that's shrinking with limited resources. So again, Rushford, just a very quick background on Rushford and Sons. As I mentioned, we opened in December 2020. We just opened as curbside cans to go. So we set up an online store. People would order online, pull up. I would run out in the snow. We're in Massachusetts. So, in December 2020 was snowy and icy. It would be me slipping all over the parking lot, running beer into people's trunks. In fact, I always joke our first customer ever is still a regular customer here, and she still drinks the same beer she ordered the first 4-pack of years ago. But it's really great how we've changed. So I'm talking to you now from our tap room here in Upton. We are in the process of opening our second tap room in Holliston, Massachusetts. And for all of you in Massachusetts, if you know where Upton is, if you're not in Massachusetts, chances are you don't know where Upton, Massachusetts is. It's a small town of about 8,000 people in south central Massachusetts. Holliston is a little bit further east, but still a smaller town, roughly 15,000 people in Massachusetts. And we're kind of small town people. And I'm not going to drone on too much about that. But kind of part of our business philosophy and business plan. But so we went through just doing curbside can sales in December 2020. We opened our outdoor beer garden in April of 21 based on the COVID restrictions. Never thought a beer garden would kind of be our jam, but now it's a kind of defining characteristic of our experience here in Upton. We opened our indoor tap room in November of 21, and now in late spring of 2025. I'm not committing to a date yet, and believe me, I don't have enough time to complain about why I can't commit to a date yet, but late spring 2025, we're opening our second tap room, and we're also making a big distribution push with our homegrown kind of sort of cell phones distribution. And believe me, I can give another 3-hour talk about my philosophy on distribution, but there's already people who are much more educated and much more experienced in distribution who have given really insightful talks here in the Craft Brewers Professional kind of online conference here. So how are we growing our business with being undercapitalized in a shrinking market? And probably about half of you listening are going to be like, oh, cool, that's it. And half of you are going to be, what? When I say this, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. Because by diversifying our operations and our offerings, by offering equity to our customers and establishing that emotional connection to our brand in a market where there's market loyalty, not brand loyalty, and including people who have not been included in the craft beer industry and the craft beer market historically, is how we're growing our audience and not competing with competitors, but growing our market and not trying to take a bite out of somebody else's market, and how we're able to grow our capitalization and grow our business and make more money and sell more beer. Because as much as I love this business, I got kids and a mortgage, and that's what we're all here for at the end of the day. If it was just about the money, our time and resources would be better used elsewhere. But selling beer in small town Massachusetts is my passion. And realistically, it's growing that community around that product that a lot of us believe in is my passion. So let's talk about the craft beer industry a little bit. By the way, if I'm looking down, I got my notes right here, so that's why I'm looking down. Again, this talk is for me. So I didn't really prepare a big slideshow or anything. So I hope my booming, jovial voice guides you along through it enough. So craft beer industry. I'm sure anybody who's in the industry have read all the articles that are out. You know, there's 5 of them a week of, oh, the craft beer industry shrinking. You know, AB InBev sold out all its craft beer brands. Oh, how many breweries went out of business this week? I get 10 emails a week from auction houses. Hey, buy a 30-barrel brew house for a nickel. Here's 100-barrel tanks for 20 cents. Pay for delivery and rigging is going to be more than you actually pay for the steel. There's so much doom and gloom around our industry. You know, Gen Z doesn't drink anymore, so nobody in Gen Z likes a sip of beer because, you know, nobody drinks anymore. Or they're only drinking ready-to-drink RTDs. No one's drinking beer anymore. And none of that's, I mean, the industry is changing, and young people's habits are different than ours. I know I'm an elder millennial, so I am no longer young, despite my denial of that. So yeah, habits are changing, and the market is changing. It's not a booming market anymore. And kind of why is that? And I have a big philosophy that I kind of made simple. And again, my business partner used to hate when I said this until I kind of thought it through a little bit more, but it always made sense. And I hope everybody listening to this right now is sitting down, because I'm about to drop a huge, very controversial bomb on all of you guys. All right. Beer isn't wine. I'm going to let that sit in for a minute. Beer is different than wine. Now, what do I mean when I say that? Because it used to be my business partner would interpret it that, well, wine is better. Wine is, you know, more highbrow. Beer is lowbrow. Blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of not really like that, because I love wine. I love beer. Like I said, I'm a fermentation enthusiast, so I love it all. But I feel like there's a role for all these different products in our lives if we accept and market them as such. So it's interesting. The gentleman from Left Hand Brewery, who I was listening to in one of the opening conferences yesterday, made a remark, and he's been in this business, you know, since well before my business was a glimmer in the eye, so to speak. And he made, like, you know, beer used to have a perception of being pedestrian. And I've been thinking about that a lot over the last 24 hours plus since I was listening, because that's really what I took away from that. And I think pedestrian, isn't wrong. He's absolutely 100% correct. I don't think as beer as pedestrian. I think of beer as accessible. So the thing is with wine is very exclusive. Oh, this bottle of 82 Lafite Rothschild was watered with orphan's tears, and the grapes were, you know, came from the stars, and, you know, it's made with magic, and we can only make X amount of bottles of it, and everybody wants this, so you can't have it. It is very exclusive. And beer is very different. There's not so much terroir with beer. And I know people are, you know, the real beer nerds are going to argue with me and stuff like that and say, well, the 23 Citra had ester flavors of horse leather and like wood oak and whatever. And, sure, that's wine stuff. What I love about beer is it's inclusive. It takes 2 weeks to make an ale, a month, 2 months to make a lager. It is as opposed to the production timeline of wine, it is way quicker and less expensive and takes way less real estate to make beer than it takes wine. You can go out, again, you can't, I'm being very reductive and hyperbolic right now. You can go out and pick some stuff in the backyard, throw it in a kettle, boil it, develop some sugars, throw some yeast in there and some bittering agent and make a beer that's palatable maybe. Beer is for everybody. Beer is inclusive and it should be accessible. And I think it's my personal opinion that with the rise of IPAs and the exclusive catering to IPAs, we've been trying to go exclusive as an industry rather than inclusive. Now, being in Massachusetts, I want to talk about Treehouse a little bit. Now, Treehouse, if I speak any ill of Treehouse, it's because I'm jealous, because I wish I found my lightning in a bottle like they did. They had a fantastic product at the exact right time, and they capitalized, and good on them. And if you love the Treehouse experience, so many people do, and it's such a valuable experience. But Treehouse had a higher end beer with Julius, with their golden child. And I know it's much more of a diverse line than that now. But they decided, so cool, you like this beer? We're not going to distribute it. You come to us. You wait in line. You have to buy a case if you want this. And it was a very exclusive business model. And the problem is a lot of other people said, oh, hey, they're Treehouse guys, they are printing money. If we do the same thing that Treehouse did, we're going to print money as well. And now, being the huge nerd that I am, I think about World of Warcraft, which if you're a video game nerd or not, World of Warcraft has had enough crossover into the pop culture zeitgeist that you probably at least know that it's a video game that exists. And World of Warcraft came out in the year of our Lord 2004. And when it came out, it was an unmitigated success. Nobody saw it coming, and it took the world by storm. I think its height, it was making up over $1 billion a month of a video game. It was making more than a Marvel movie made its entire run a month, which is bonkers. So there's so many other video game companies say, hey, they're making $1 billion a month with World of Warcraft. If I do the same exact thing, I'll get the same results. But we don't get that. What we did get is a beer market that catered to one specific sector of the market and tried to be more like wine than beer. Oh, this IPA uses these fancy pants exclusive hops, and it's so exclusive and it's expensive. Yeah, it's going to be $25 a 4-pack because it's really fancy beer. Which, again, if that's your jam, great. IPA feelings matter. IPAs matter. IPAs are a delicious style, and they're one of many styles because the focus on IPAs lately ignores the diversity and the accessibility that's been a huge staple of beer culture time immemorial. So the thing is, when it's, oh, hey, if you don't like IPAs, you don't like beer, it opens up for, like, maybe I don't like beer. Maybe I like the ready-to-drink cocktail, the high noons and the stuff that's, very easy to drink, light on flavor, and, is $13 a 4-pack as opposed to $25 a 4-pack. And people aren't looking down at me if I order what I want. And the thing is, when the market itself is exclusive, we're ignoring what makes beer beer, and we're trying to make beer something that it's not. Now, in terms of the role of different alcohols in our lives, that's a whole other 2-hour talk, which, believe me, I'd love to give sometimes about the role of wine, beer, spirits, cocktails, straight spirits, but that's a whole different thing. So, but one of the reasons, again, going back to trying to keep on the tracks here, I hear a lot about how ready-to-drinks are so hot right now, and I love ready-to-drinks. I'll drink a high noon on the beach with friends before I reach for, an 8% DEPA all day long, because it's refreshing and it's crisp and it's easy drinking, and it's going to have a level of flavor that doesn't have to be sit there and sipped. I'm never going to reach for, a glass of whiskey on the beach. I want something easy drinking. So, but the thing is with ready-to-drinks that I feel like a lot of people are missing is that it's accessible. So what does that mean? And one thing I love about, so again, talking back to beer, here at Rushford Sons, we have 16 taps. And of those 16 taps, At any point, I have about 2 to 4 IPAs on. I mean, I'm always going to have IPAs on because IPA feelings matter. And I got kids and a mortgage. One of our second bestseller is our signature IPA. It's 5.5% grapefruit hazy, which is super easy drinking. The grapefruit's a component to the flavor. The sweetness and the acidity aren't a primary flavor driver, but it's mostly the sweetness and the acidity from the grapefruit that round out the hop forward flavors and make it an easier drinking IPA. It's also 5.5%. So it's a little bit heavier than a session, but still easy drinking. And it's something a little bit different than everybody else is drinking, but it's still accessible, which I think is the big thing with beer. So forever, beer was something accessible. You go to a beer hall, you sit down, you connect with your community, and you have a beer or three. And I feel like that's the real thing that beer needs to focus on, is having something for everybody. Now, in my tap room, there's few things I love hearing more than, hey, I'm not really a beer person, but X beer is really good and I really like it. And I think to myself in my head, no, you are a beer person. You just haven't found the style you like yet. But the cool thing about beer is there's so many different styles and it's so diverse. You have some beers that are in the 3% alcohol range. You have beers in the 13, 14% alcohol range. You have beers that are hop forward. You have beers that are malt forward, beers that are yeast forward. And it's so cool the amount of styles you can get a beer, but it's still fundamentally beer. And I feel like that's what, as a industry, we need to focus on, is there's a beer for everybody. If you're an IPA person, great. There's certainly a lot of IPAs for you. If you're a light beer person, we got a great light beer for you. If you're a sour person, we got a beer for you. If you're kind of like a traditional style person, we got a beer for you. There's beer for everybody, and there's a lot of great perspectives. And one thing I feel like we don't focus on beer, the power of beer is being that social lubricant. Now, what do I mean by that too? And I want to kind of go into my next point as well about the role of beer and how to overcome the negative stigma that's kind of attached to beer by a lot of young people and a lot of people who don't like beer. I've already kind of talked about where I think part of the problem with the craft beer industry is we've attached craft beer to IPAs too much, where if somebody doesn't like IPAs, they just assume they don't like craft beer. And that's very rarely the actual case in real life. It's just the perception. So how do we overcome these negative stigmas to beer, and how do we really focus on the role of beer in our lives? So talking about the role of beer, in my opinion, as I just mentioned, social lubricant. And that doesn't necessarily mean getting drunk. That doesn't mean, shotgunning beers in a night until you aren't feeling feelings anymore. It's not that at all. For me personally, so by the way, the beer that I'm drinking now is one that we make called Upton Light. It's 4%. It is actually an ale. It's not a lager, but it's just a little bit of Pilsner, a little bit of flaked corn, and then bittered with just a touch of Mount Hood. It's super light, crisp, refreshing. It's easy to drink. It's cheap. We sell it for $6.50 a pint. And right now, on a thing like this, it's one of my favorite things to drink, because where I'm talking, I don't need to be drunk. I just want to relax and enjoy a conversation and a dialogue. And that's what beer does. If I'm hanging out with friends, talking about the game, talking about current events, talking about a book that I read or a video game that I liked, I want to have a couple beers and have a conversation and loosen up a little bit. I'm not looking to get drunk. I'm not looking to be like, oh, wow, well, the 2025 Mount Hood crop has these different tasting notes from the 24 Mount Hood crop. No, I'm sitting here to have a conversation and engage with my community, whether it's been a couple of close friends, I'm talking about strangers at the bar, or anywhere in between. So how do we overcome that negative stigma that's been attached to beer? I think the diverse styles. Beer, there's so many different styles. There's hundreds, if not thousands of different styles. I don't need to list them. Guys, I'm a salesperson. I'm not an engineer. I don't have the exact number of styles. But there's a lot. And there's a great diverse styles that are all fundamentally beer, but can have such a different range of flavors and tastes. And focusing on that is very important. Community equity is something that's been huge for us. So right now, my front of house manager is our first employee we ever hired, who we found through Facebook. He was following very closely what we were doing, and we put a call that we needed help. He was on it. He was on it fast, and he's still, 4 years later, celebrating his 4 years here in May. Invaluable part. Our brewer, she started as a customer here who just always liked drinking beer, never brewed a drop of beer in her life. She got hired as a part-time bartender. We needed an assistant brewer. our brewer left, and then she stepped up, and now she does such a fantastic job. And she was just a part of our community that stepped up. And when, a lot of beer, especially our tiny breweries, our size, are going out of business, our community, we try to develop that emotional connection and that community equity where our community steps up for us. And we have a lot, do a lot of different events here, which everybody will be like, oh yeah, if you want to build your community roots, have events. But listen to your community, engage with your community, be a part of your community. Don't just have farmers markets and local musicians here. I mean, that's important. Like, having stuff like that is important, but you have to believe with it and actually give your community the equity and emotional attachment to your business. And talking about those events, you need inclusive events. Don't just look at what other people are doing. Look at who your community is and who you want to bring in and include them. So again, the IPA people, they're included in breweries already. But we want to grow our market and target people who would love hanging out at your brewery, but don't think it's for them. When you include them, you're not just competing for the hardcore market. You're growing your market. You're growing the craft beer market exponentially because you're training people that aren't craft beer people. Hey, you like hanging out here because you're developing this emotional connection to this community. And hey, maybe you are a craft beer person because there's such a diverse amount of styles of craft beer out there, and you just haven't found the one that is right for you. But with all the brewery owners who are listening to this or watching this, hey, with your great diverse styles and your great diverse offerings, you're going to find something that person that you decided and reached out to and included in your community is going to form that emotional attachment and form that equity with. So I always like to talk about my favorite Pixar movie, which is Ratatouille, and the antagonist, and I make big finger quotes on that, Anton Ego. Because one scene that's resonated in my brain for 20 years, I think the movie's been out for, call it 20 years. I don't know, I'm not an IMDb geek, but when he sits down at the end, Fancy Pants food critic sits down, and the protagonist's Fancy Pants, Parisian fine dining restaurant, and the waiter protagonist asks him, "What can I get you tonight, sir?" He says, "Perspective." And that's something that has always resonated with me. Because going back to Treehouse, when Treehouse started, they had a perspective. And their perspective is we helped invent this style of beer, and we are going to ride what we did and make it our lightning in a bottle. And they did, and they print money. So I ask myself all the time, and I'd ask every other brewer out there, what is your perspective? And for Rushford Sons, since we started, it was honor, progress, tradition. We honor the thousands of years of beer history. We find most of our styles into traditional styles, but we want to progress them and put our spin on that. And what does that mean? I mean, it's kind of our own internal buzzwords, which, again, we don't have another 2 hours, so I can go on and on and on what that means, but it's our general rough perspective. So when you're thinking about your diverse offerings to try to include more segments of the market that's not included in a lot of traditional breweries, and you're trying to create that community equity, think about what your perspective is, because that scene in that movie has resonated with me so much, because all that food critic wanted wasn't the fanciest pants food. A food critic in Paris. He did nothing but eat fancy pants, highly executed food. He wants to know what your perspective on that food is. And when I go into a brewery, whether it's mine or anybody else's, I want to know what their perspective on beer is. Whether it's my perspective or not, at least it's a perspective, and their perspective isn't, well, another successful brewery did this, so if we do the same exact thing this other brewery did, we're going to be successful too. So I've been going on and on and on about my philosophies about the market, where I think the market is, yada, yada, yada. But I haven't really talked about how we're growing our business in a shrinking market. And I think I've kind of alluded to it a little bit and kind of hinted a little bit. But realistically, what we've been, with our, having a diverse selection of products, building community equity, and including historically neglected markets, we've raised enough capital where we take in our limited production headroom. So talking real industry talk now, right now with the production headroom, we have a 3.5 barrel system. I've got 2 3.5 barrel tanks and 3 7 barrel tanks. So we do 1 turn or 2 turn days. We also we started about, as of last summer, our own distribution company that's representing a couple other local non-competing alcohol brands. And I could again, go on for another hour about that. I feel like I keep saying that, but I'm going to keep saying that. But realistically, doing the number to make the maximum efficient use of our production headroom without going to contract production, which we are not afraid of, and certainly and have done a couple times in the past to test the waters, and certainly will do so, is we identified another small town, which is going to be a great fit for what we do. And it's a pain in the neck to open in a small town, which is why there's nothing there. But the good thing is there's no competition, because we've identified another community that needs a community focal point and wants a business like ours that's going to focus on building that community equity and monetizing that community equity by including as many people in that community as possible and giving a diverse perspective on products that we offer and including everybody. Now, a lot of people have also talked a lot about how, well, you have to include everybody in your taproom space. And yeah, we also do. We work with a couple Massachusetts wineries to offer wine here. We work with a Massachusetts cider brand. We offer hard cider here. We manufacture our own hard seltzer, which is lovely. We do our hard seltzer just plain out of the tap, and we mix it with a lot of different flavorings. So we can offer as many different flavors of hard seltzer as we want. And that's all part of creating that community equity. But our real monetization is selling beer for money. But we believe in what we do by offering those diverse brands, by including people who are traditionally not included, and creating that community equity. And yeah, I know I sound like a broken record. I've sounded like a broken record. I'm going to continue sounding like a broken record on those DEI initiatives, now that we've actually talked what that means in real life, of the way we are not just trying to compete for an existing market, but trying to actively grow that market in our communities by just being a part of them and making sure there's something for everybody, whether they've traditionally been included or not. So going back to the real business talk, with our production headroom, I've done the numbers 6 ways from Sunday, and we're better off having a second tap room with the additional overhead, but also with the additional monetization, because we all know, I don't need to break it down. Smarter people than me have been breaking it down this conference about the markup, pouring a beer into a glass out of a tap as opposed to putting it into a can and selling it for half the price, and a competitive shelf space. So really, number one is us doing the math, and having built that community equity, we have been able to find the funding to build out the second tap room in I'm spending way too much money, but the appropriate amount of money, building out in a historic building in the center of a small town that's going to be a great community focal point. So by really focusing on what our limited production, how to most efficiently monetize our limited production headspace, is how and also by growing our market by including people historically not included in the craft beer market, is the real secret sauce to how we're growing our small business, with scotch tape and bubblegum and not a lot of resources, and what a doom and gloom, crashing, shrinking market. Now, I also think it's funny how so many people talk about, well, the market shrank by 3%, so it's all over. Wrap it up, craft beer. Where, in the mid-aughts, craft beer is like 16% growth year over year. You could build a temple to beer and just be like, hey, we're a brewery, we sell beer, and you're going to have a line out the door. Your beer could be awful and your tap room could be terrible, but it didn't matter because people were really into craft beer and it was a fad. But I kind of really look at craft beer like I like heavy metal. By the way, big metalhead. Heavy metal, sometimes it's really popular, sometimes it isn't. But it's always there. It's always going to have its solid foundation. There's always going to be people who want to listen to heavy metal. So the last thing I'll say is, by building our business undercapitalized with scotch tape and bubblegum, we spent a lot of time over the last 4 years building a solid foundation, not just spending money on marketing, not inking a high-profile distribution deal that's going to get our beer everywhere. And so people like it because it's there, not because they have the emotional connection to the brand. We've built a solid foundation. Now, have we monetized as quickly as spending $5 million on a marketing campaign and doing a big distribution push with a major distributor? No, we haven't printed the money that fast. But we're growing slowly but surely because the house we're building is built on a really solid grassroots foundation built on building community equity. And we built that community equity by having a diverse offerings of products and including historically unincluded markets. Now, that's half an hour, so I know I could have gone on for 45 minutes, but that is my half an hour. So I guess to wrap this up, don't decide who a craft beer person is. Assume everybody is a craft beer person who just hasn't found the craft beer they like. And if they aren't a craft beer person, have non-alcoholic options, have wine options, but build your community and build your foundation, and then the opportunities will come from that. And if you're involved in your community is going to involve you. Guys, I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for all of you who've actually listened to me drone on for the last half an hour. I really appreciate it. My name is Brian Goodman. If you want to talk about this, tell me what I nailed, tell me what I'm wrong about. My email address is Brian, BRIAN, at RAS, acronym for Rushford Sons, rasbrewhouse.com. Everybody, Brian Goodman, Rushford Sons Brewhouse. Enjoy, and yeah, l'chaim.